Hey, welcome to Untold Season 2. Untold is about what doesn't make it into the press releases, the real decisions, the real costs, and the patterns that Utah's best leaders have learned the hard way. Today's guest is Tyler Margetts, CEO of LR Dynamics, a Salt Lake City-based platform that acquires and improves legacy manufacturing businesses. Now, Tyler's not a typical acquirer. He grew up in this industry, literally. He bought the company back from his parents, the family business, in 2018, and he's quietly been building something that most people don't see every day. Running one company is hard. Tyler's running 4 companies that he's acquired, each with its own people, customers, and demands. Um, it's a different problem for each company's maybe every day. Today, we're getting into what that approach actually costs, how growth decisions get made when resources are finite, and what you learn about yourself when every business in your portfolio needs more than you might have that day. So, Tyler, welcome back.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. You're the first repeat podcast that I've done with the, you came on season 1 and we talked a little bit about your business. And people had questions. So we're here to maybe dig a little bit more into those questions.
Right?
So I mentioned the 4 businesses. So, LR Dynamics has Lynn Russ Gym Products, Focus Manufacturing, Specialty Steel, and North Slope Chillers. Um, so at one level, at a high level, it might look like there's some things in common with those companies, but there's also a lot of differences when you look at those. And so I want to talk more about that. But I'm curious, as you've built this portfolio, what did you think this was going to require of you as CEO? And maybe what was maybe something you didn't expect?
Yeah. I the goal in the beginning was to utilize kind of an internal, like a central infrastructure to be able to use across multiple companies. And so I think at the outset of it all, that's kind of what I anticipated. But what I didn't anticipate was, how every business is so unique, and how much of running those distinct businesses required me to have a really good process for um, really intentionally staying out of some of the details, uh, just in terms of time and effort. Because if I were to go in super deep into any of those businesses at any moment for too long, I would be neglecting something else that also needed my help, just as urgent, just as important, because it's in a different industry with different customers. So that was something I didn't anticipate, was how much I had to intentionally stay out of some of the details and really focus on delegating.
Wow, that's a skill that I think a lot of CEOs struggle with one business. So I'm curious. So what are some of the things, like what are the tactics that you found that work, that allow you to do that, to have that distance?
Yeah. So, I came from the technology industry, from the software industry. And so sometimes I kind of lean toward that angle a little bit to solve problems. And in this case, one thing that's really helped me um, is, well, first of all, organization, the organizational structure. I've played with a lot of different things there. Sometimes I'm sure people are thinking, okay, what's going to change this next month? Is anything going to change organizationally? Is my position going to change? But it's taken some time to kind of dial it in, kind of trial and error. But I feel like we've really nailed down the structure, which is each of our businesses, each of the 4 businesses has a general manager. And that wasn't always the case. And so there was some confusion even in my own mind, of what is my role for this business and what is my role for this business, and they could be very different. And because of that, it would create some chaos. Like, okay, I have to get involved in these decisions for this one, but not in these decisions for this one because I'm in a kind of in a different role.
Uh,
But kind of creating a standard structure where each of the businesses will have their own organizational structure, but no matter what, they at the top they have a GM, and so my focus then shifted to I have 4 GMs that report to me, and I can do the same kinds of things with each of those GMs, even if we're talking about different problems or have different strategies. But my process in working with those GMs all the time can be consistent. And so, coming back to leveraging technology, we use Microsoft Teams internally. And I've used this other tool that's been really nice called Geekbot, and what it does is for each of my GMs on a weekly basis and on a daily basis, this bot goes out and asks those people questions. And those questions are questions that I've set up in Geekbot. But every day, each of those GMs will get you know, the daily one asks things like, "How are you feeling today?" Something that simple. And then, "What are some problems you've faced today? What are some ideas you've had today?" And that one is just good for me to get a feel for where they're at. Like if they're really struggling with something, I can see it in that question and those answers. And then weekly, they get a more in-depth version that goes into detail about what are the strategies we've decided on for the year? And what are the major process improvements for the year? Has anybody had to have be written up on something, or what personnel issues have you had? So every week I get a full report from each of them just automatically. And I can be, it doesn't matter where I'm at. I could be in our Salt Lake office. I could be in our Ogden office because they're mixed between those two.
mhm.
Could be on vacation or something. And I can read those descriptions and really understand what's happening at the business. And then so I know what's going on, but I don't have to know all the details. But it enables me to ask more questions where I need to and give support where it needs to be given.
So it's kind of like your cockpit, and it
Yes.
tells you where the red lights are, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
where you need to make a decision about some time, or to dig a little deeper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we have metrics too. We use Power BI for metrics, and we pull metrics from all over the place. We have 3 different ERP systems we're using. Some of our one of our companies, the ERP encompasses all of the financial data. Other ones we're using an ERP plus QuickBooks. So we have all this data spread around all these systems, but Power BI brings it all together. But those are just the numbers. The Geekbot thing through Teams gives me the deeper picture as to what's really happening from the perspective of a GM.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I'm interested then. So that gives you some elevation and some flexibility to decide on how you spend your time. What happens when you have these four businesses and maybe the two of them are asking for the same resource, right? Whether that's investment, time, your time, something like that. How do those trade-offs get made?
Yeah, that is probably one of the hardest things we face. We're being pretty aggressive right now on some growth plans for all of our businesses, and so there is this kind of a grab for capital. Um, and we're self-sufficient when it comes to capital. We do our own acquisitions. We may bring in some bank debt or a seller note or something to make the acquisition happen, but on an ongoing basis, we're using our own capital to reinvest to grow. And so it does come up a lot. And one thing that has helped us with that, and it's interesting because it's not something that is solved in the moment. It's what happens. The planning we do at the beginning of the year or before the next year starts.
Mhm.
So we'll get together in November and do our planning for the next year. And it goes back to those things I just mentioned. We're deciding what is our strategy, or what products are we going to sell? Where are we going to compete? Like strategy in the true sense of the word. So determining what that is for each business, and then what are our major process improvements, and that's where you'll see things that are usually capital intensive, like we need this piece of equipment, or
Okay.
need to hire these positions, or things like that. And so, because everybody is gathering together, everybody meaning we have all the GMs there and some other key positions. So everyone is kind of working on what that looks like, and then they share amongst themselves.
Okay.
And so what happens is that, and we're revisiting that all the time. Um, those Geekbot updates that I mentioned, all of the GMs see all of the other GMs' responses too. So what it does is it makes it so that each GM knows what the other ones are doing, and what they're working on, and what their part is in the strategy. So, for example, this year, one of our more mature businesses, is not requiring a lot of capital investment, but another one is requiring a massive amount of investment because of what's in their strategy for this year and what's in their process improvement list.
Hmm.
But the more mature business knows that, okay, well, they know what's going on over there. And so they recognize when if they need something and I have to say, well, yeah, that'd be nice, but we got to wait on that because, as you know, we are already investing so much over in this other business. And so we can't make that investment now for your business.
Hmm.
So I think it really helps to have them just from the beginning kind of know what each other's doing.
Transparency and yeah, okay. And then it sounds like you're kind of able to put things in one kind of in one grouping. You can then look at like where the best investments are. If you have to make choices, you can make
Yeah.
initial choices there. How you mentioned like one business almost kind of sacrificing opportunity for another business. How do you create how are you creating a situation where everybody's winning?
Yeah. So yeah, it's hard. Ev- the we do our best to balance where we're making investments, but the investments aren't always where the thing that makes us win in each business. So like I mentioned a minute ago, our more mature business, it's because of where it is, it just doesn't need a lot of investment right now. So they're winning in different ways, like where it's not requiring us to put up a bunch of capital to buy new equipment and these sorts of things. And then that business has more human resources than any of our other businesses. So, they may not be winning when it comes to capital investment, but they're winning in terms of just people horsepower, people power. They have more resources internally, but this other business over here has more capital investment right now. Um, and then what's cool is that we sometimes we have to use maybe some bank debt to buy a piece of equipment or something.
Hmm.
You leverage the group as a whole for the individual businesses, which they could never do on their own. And so that's really cool to
So you
see
get an
that.
economy of scale with that. Yeah. Okay.
So I think because we're constantly talking about we are a group. We're not just one. We're not running in isolation. That's I haven't had a lot of problems with people getting frustrated, like, oh, so and so is getting more than me, because they know it's going to flip flop and it's going to change. Something else that I really enjoy is, um, personnel needs change all the time, and um, we've been able to, as much as we can, take people from one business and shift them to another one as into a new position, and really in the spirit of career growth. And so that's been really neat to see. Somebody who maybe in the past would have had to be laid off because that position changed or was no longer needed, and they could move into another role, learn some new skills, and keep growing
Mm.
and still be within our company. It's kind of usually what you see at like a huge business, but we're able to do it at a smaller.
Okay. You know, I'm curious because that diversity of those businesses can brings different perspectives. It's from the point where you had one company to now with four. How has your definition of excellence changed?
I don't think it has really. Every across our four businesses right now, they're each in very different positions. Some are early, some are like further down the improvement path. Others are still figuring out what that looks like and where their growth is going to come from. And so for me, the definition of excellence comes from um, one of our values. We have three core values. One of them is pursue excellence. And so to me, if the definition of that is we're constantly looking for better ways to do things, um, and very much focus on the customer. How do we provide more value for the customer? And I'm confident that as we're doing that, we're going to see, the financial metrics improve, even if it may take more time for that to happen for one business than it does for another. Um, they're all achieving their own excellence in different ways.
Oh, okay. So you're defining excellence as a journey, not the destination.
Yeah, definitely. And what's crazy is like one of our businesses right now, ran into a big roadblock with some uh, a certification that was required because of like a change at the federal level for from the EPA. So the EPA made a change. Everybody had to recertify, and so one of our businesses just got stuck in this limbo of they couldn't sell anything for a while, and we're just barely getting to where we can again. So this poor business had this great growth trajectory and was seeing great things, but then all of a sudden they couldn't sell anything, and so this poor GM is like, "Don't shut us down. Like, I know we haven't had any revenue, but I promise we're working on it." And I keep telling him, like, "It's okay. Like, we know what's happening. We know why it's happening, and there's a lot of good things happening. And thank goodness there's three other businesses that are doing well enough that they're covering you right now." And so, I mean, it's interesting, like that really kind of hardship for that one business, like going through that hardship has brought those 4 GMs together because they feel like, "Hey, I'm giving to this other business to help them succeed." So it is about the journey. Like that's otherwise, like we would have had to cut them off, but
Right.
we're looking at the
Yeah.
long term.
Ouch. Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good example. Um, yeah, I'm wondering, um, what about this has taught you about what you can delegate and what you can't delegate? Because it sounds like you're having to operate with some very different constraints than other business leaders.
Yeah, so what I can or can't delegate, I'm so growing up, I was always one that kind of thrived on responsibility. I kind of grabbed for it and liked it when someone gave me a chance to prove that I could be responsible, even if I was like younger. And um, that's something that as we've grown and I've really tried to promote people from within into these roles, like this GM role. A couple of my GMs are really relatively young for being a GM of that size of a business. And um, I've learned that um, kind of self reflection that I thrived on responsibility when I was younger. And now I expect that same level of thriving on responsibility from others. And so I tend to give people a chance, regardless of like maybe sometimes it may seem like it's kind of early to give somebody that responsibility. And so I've really learned that I can delegate a lot more. And it's worked well. These people that I've given more responsibility to have really stepped up. And so sometimes I have to remind myself, like, hey, you can give them more. than you're giving, and try it and see what happens. So
Mm.
even though I believed it, and as just for myself, and like it is still, it's just against human nature, I guess, to want to like relinquish control. And so even though I like was a believer in that, it's still, I've had to like really consciously push myself to give more responsibility and more control, because I can't. I just don't have the, I don't have the time. If I were just by myself, I didn't have a family, I didn't have anything else outside of work, I would be here all the time, and I probably wouldn't be good at it because I'd be burned out. So I have to give that responsibility.
I'm curious. So for somebody maybe who's struggling with that, what's something you do when you delegate that you think is important to make it successful?
Yeah, I think it goes back. I'm a huge believer in creating a good process, and the process does not have to be complex. But going back to this Geekbot concept in Microsoft Teams, something as simple as that, where there's some accountability that they are kind of reporting back to me on a regular basis, and they know I expect it. If I don't see a response, like one of the weekly updates come through, they're getting messaged by me, or I'm telling them in person, like, "Hey, I need to see your weekly update. Otherwise, I don't know what's going on and I can't help you." And so my advice would be, look at what information you need, and from whoever you're delegating to, create a process, a simple process to automate that delegation and responsibility and reporting back, and that makes it a lot easier. Um, so what happens with me, I can focus on other things. Like, I'm looking at what's next, and what are we going to be doing 3 years from now? What's our next business, or what's like a bigger picture thing that I can be working on. But if I know that process is there, it holds me accountable to like go read their responses, because it pings me on my screen. I get a notification, so it kind of triggers me to go look at what they said, and they get notified, so they get triggered to respond, to send the Geekbot to me. I think in the absence of that, it would be really hard for me to remember, oh, I got to get an update from this person. And okay, maybe today I'm going to go walk over and get an
Mm.
update from this person. And that's just not, there's a lot of waste in that.
Yeah. Okay. So some simple systems. I'm hearing about visibility, right, as a part of that with the reporting, and
Yeah.
helps to create that accountability. Because I'm you know we're kind of wrestling with this question of, okay, you're running four, they have some similarities and connections, but they're different businesses, and how do you do it? And what I'm hearing is this delegation is a big part of it. Like if you don't have somebody, this managing director at the top of that business optimizing that business, it won't free you up to be able to arbitrate across the businesses and be able to really look for the next growth opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. My role has shifted from, I mean, I think about my dad, who owned the Linrus, the first business that I bought. My job as CEO is completely different from what his job looked like. I mean, he was in the business doing engineering work, super involved, and my job is, I don't get involved in engineering at all. I mean, I get involved in the decision making and give advice for the decisions because I want to know what's happening, but I'm not an engineer, so I don't have the skills to even do it. Um, but so my job is then to support these four people, and there's others that report to me too, like HR and compliance. We have a compliance manager that runs across all four businesses.
Okay.
So like my job is to support these people that are reporting to me, that are kind of acting as proxy for me in doing these activities. So our compliance manager is a good example. I used to be the compliance manager. Essentially, I helped one of our businesses get AS9100 certified to do aerospace and defense work. I was the one who did that. That was one of my kind of forward-looking strategies.
Hmm.
I didn't have anybody to do it. I just had to do it. I was the internal auditor. I was sitting down in the certification audits. I was the guy for it. And once it got implemented, then it was time, and we were big enough. I could bring somebody else internally into that role and train them up on it. So now my job is shifted to I support him. He just went through a certification audit, and it's stressful. But he's sending me feedback from the auditor. How should I respond to this? And what do you think about this? So I view my role as supporting him in the
Mm,
role that I delegated to him.
okay. So yeah, I'm hearing that clear evolution, right? Of your job has changed
Yeah.
multiple times as you've grown from one company to two to three and now to four. So if you extend that path a little bit, thinking about, let's say you double revenue or you have five companies, or more, what do you think will be needed of you as CEO then that you haven't been asked for yet?
Um, Honestly, I think I view it as being similar. Um, to me, I would add another GM for that business. But what would likely happen is my conversations and what I would be involved in to help that particular GM would be like what I'm doing with some of our other businesses now that are earlier in their growth trajectory. So, a lot of marketing, a lot of figuring out how to reach customers, maybe how do we innovate our products, whatever it may be, or our services. So, what I'm, what changes is what I'm doing to help coach that person and elevate that person to make better decisions. Because aside from that, it's implementing standard processes that we're implementing everywhere, and we're getting better at it. um, how we run each of our businesses. They're similar, even though they're different businesses. They're run in all the same ways,
Hmm.
but with different people, different setup, different teams, but they're using some of the same processes. So I think the biggest change for me, if we added, we hope to add maybe five, six, seven, maybe three or four more over the next 7 years. Um, I would need to really be even more diligent in protecting my time so that I could stay focused on helping each of those GMs to accomplish what they need to do. I failed to mention one of the other things I do. So I get those weekly updates, but I also hold an hour one on one with each of them every week. So as we add more people to that mix, and that's a lot of one on ones, a lot of 1 hour one on ones. And so I have to figure out how to manage that better. Do I do them all on the same day, or do I split them up in certain ways? Or
Okay.
also keeping my priority on the GMs. Maybe there comes a point where the compliance manager needs to report to the CFO and not to me. And like my when I got my master's degree, I specialized in organizational behavior and HR. That was my emphasis in my MBA program. And so that's like what I always kind of go to is how can I adjust the organization and with all these pieces I have to work with.
Okay. So you think, I mean, it sounds like you feel like the current model's pretty scalable, but you're going to need to make some adjustments as things get bigger to maybe protect your time. And that seems to be still the kind of the primary resource that you're concerned
Right.
with is how do I protect my time so I can enable these GMs to deliver what they need to.
Yeah. And what's tricky is if we find another company and they have to be self-sufficient. So we may acquire a company that just can't afford a GM. And we have to be really careful about that when we make a decision to acquire something. Uh, we probably shouldn't acquire something that
It
can't
needs
afford
too
a
much
GM.
work. Yeah. Yeah.
Because then of course, like who's going to do it? It's going to be me and maybe my CFO, or like we're going to have to be hands on. Um, but what's great is what we're trying to do is we're trying to build up this workforce internally of we're trying to build up this group of leaders that right now we probably have three or four people I can think of that could become a GM for a new acquisition. Um, or we find an acquisition that has somebody. already in it that could be a GM.
On your website, it's really clear. You make it really, you lead directly with long-term stewardship, right? That's your concern, not fix and flips. Like, um, tell me about because this sounds almost like marketing, right? Toward other companies, right? So, um, how does that? Um, yeah, tell me more about how that philosophy is expressed in your organization.
Yeah. Comparing what we do to private equity, for example, they have outside investors that they have a responsibility to, and so there's some pressure there that for performance or to buy a company, strip it of cost, jack up the revenue, and then sell it for more for their investors, right? So
You know?
fundamentally, we don't have that pressure because we're trying to do it ourselves. So we're responsible to ourselves, and that that fundamentally makes a huge difference because when it comes to stewardship, stewardship is not does not take a short term view. I think about an example. My kids go to this school that talks a lot about stewardship, and whenever I'm at the school, and if I go into the restroom, it's like, you imagine like a K through 12 restroom, it can be really dirty.
Yeah.
And, but they talk about stewardship all the time there. And they have this little sign in the bathroom that says, it talks about stewardship. And it says, stewardship in a bathroom means that you clean up the sink after you're done and make sure you've picked up any garbage that you see on the floor. So you walk into these bathrooms at their school and they're really clean. And and I always think, man, I better like do my part. Like when I use a paper towel, I better wipe down the sink.
Hmm.
And so now I think of that even at our company, in our bathrooms here, I'm like, okay, I gotta show stewardship. But that like if you're taking a short-term view in that simple example, you don't care about wiping off the sink because that's not going to benefit you in any way. And all it's going to do is actually take more time and effort on your part, which if you're short-term focused, that like you don't care about that. Stewardship is to me generally means you're taking a long view. You're taking the time to make it better for somebody else. And so at our company, how that manifests is we we will make decisions that from the outside people would say, well, that was stupid. Like, what's the return on that? And we try to make good financial decisions, obviously for out of necessity, but we're willing to take longer views whenever we can, when it makes sense, because we know like this may not benefit us right this minute, but it's going to over time. So whether that is maybe we are overstaffing a little bit in an area that if we were owned by a private equity firm that they would just say no way, like that's too much cost. We're willing to let that be for a while because we know what's coming down the pipeline, and or investing in training and employees. We do a lot of investment in training, and we try to do it efficiently. We try to leverage federal grants to help pay for
Hmm.
the trainings, and so we really invest a lot in training. And sometimes it's bit us, like we train someone and then they're gone. But for all the people that are staying that we invested in, like it's benefits, it's really helped us. So
Hmm.
um, I would say the way I would describe it is we are a little bit more patient with capital than you would typically see, because we're giving these businesses a chance to a certain degree. We can't just let it go forever, not be
Right.
profitable, but
You
it's
can't
patient.
jeopardize the whole thing to protect
Right.
one underperforming. Yeah, and the other thing that stuck out to me as you're talking about that too is a lot of times owners who are selling, they're concerned about the employees. They're like family,
Yeah.
right? And you're talking about, you were talking about stewarding the people too, right? And developing people within the organization that might even move to other parts of the organization or become a GM of another business at some point. All right. Which, yeah, that's not something you see in a lot of companies. So that's
Yeah,
cool.
the way I've talked about this a lot internally. I talk about, hey, we're building our dream team here, and if we've got this dream team, then we can. It doesn't matter what we do. Like we can make popsicles, you know, and we would do it well, and we would succeed at it. And so, we really are trying to build a team that we're trying to create a great place to work. And if we're creating a great place to work, that means people will come here and thrive. And we do everything we can to support them and to create an environment where they can thrive. And there's limits to that. Like we're not a huge company with endless capital. So we just try to do our best with what we have. You know, like I said, sometimes we try something and it doesn't work very well, or sometimes we may not succeed in, giving somebody the support they need, and they may leave and think, man, those guys did not take care of me. And like we are constantly asking our people for feedback so that that doesn't happen, but we're not perfect. So it may happen on occasion, but as much as we can, we're trying to create a great place to work where people can come and they love to be here. And so then like everything is opened up. Like you could shift from position to position, and if you love to be here and you feel supported, then who cares what you're doing?
All right.
You're going to find something else to do, and you're going to get better at it, and then we're going to succeed financially, and you're going to be able to grow personally, financially, to support
Yeah.
your life outside of work. And I've loved to, my favorite thing has been to see people move around to different positions in our company and to grow on each step, and to see, because they're succeeding, pursuing excellence, the company is succeeding, and so we're able to pay them more. And so, like, it's so fun for me to see people, like, be able to buy their first house, or be able
Yeah.
to afford having a kid, and, um, that's really fun.
Mm, that's cool. Yeah, so I want to be respectful of time. I have one final question. This one is a little bit, yeah, a little unusual. Trying out. So use your imagination. You're exiled to a desert island, and you have to start over as CEO. Right?
Okay.
What's the most important CEO trait that you wouldn't be able to do without on the desert island?
Um, I would say, um, a desire to help others. So, um, I just finished a book called Theo of Golden, and, this author wrote this book. It's his first book, and it's now a New York Times bestseller. And it's about this old man who goes to a town, and it's kind of a narrative about how he helps other people and the effect it has on the town. And I'm not claiming to be like that guy, but I think, if you are focused on building and lifting other people, um, like they're gonna be bought into your team, and they're gonna give back and they're gonna make things happen for you and with you, because they know that you're there to support them. So I feel like that's the number one thing, because then you can do anything. You can make popsicles or whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and I did not give you that question ahead of time, like but it sounded like a scripted answer. That was amazing.
Yeah, it's because I just
You
read
put
that
some
book.
thought into this.
Yeah, that idea of service. I finished another book recently called Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty,
Yeah.
and that's what he says at the end of his book. He says, like, number one is service.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good book. I've read. Yeah, excellent. Well, awesome. Really appreciate you jumping in to dig in a little bit deeper. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for being honest about what you're working through, not just what you've figured out already, but that's what makes things interesting for folks to listen to. Um, Thank you
Thanks
for
for
your
sharing
time
these
today.
stories. I love what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you. Enjoy it. Thanks a lot, Tyler.
Thank you.
Yep.